back on a Young Turks election coverage. Cenk, Uygur, John Iadarola, Anna Kasparian with you guys. We have poll closings. We already have results. I will get to your comments and all the other things we do in a minute. But first, Indiana, Kentucky, Vermont, New Hampshire, Georgia, Florida, South Carolina have all closed. And we already have 3 results. So far, every result coming in, almost every result coming in is in favor of Donald Trump. MAGA, start the reel. Okay.
My life is so pathetic that I sit around waiting for when you guys are upset.
Oh yeah, I can't wait to drink your tears. All right, here we go. New York Times has called Kentucky 8 electoral college votes going to Donald Trump in Kentucky. And CNN has called Indiana for Donald Trump. That is at 11 electoral votes in Indiana going to Donald Trump. He's up 19-0. Hold, here comes Biden. Vermont goes to Biden. 3. So it is currently 3-19. And by the way, I'll just have you know, one of the most progressive states comes in first for Biden. So progressives doing their job. We'll see how everybody else does.
Cenk, I'm getting word that because of Joe Biden surging with those few electoral college votes, they've decided to declare victory right now, actually.
Yeah.
So they're calling it 18 electoral college votes.
Yeah, that's right.
But anyway, we also do have Mark Warner being called by the AP as having been reelected in Virginia.
All right, so Mark Warner is a total corporate Democrat in Virginia, but he is a Democrat and he's won re-election easily, and we'll give you updates on some of the other easy races as well. Soon, we'll get to declare Jamal Bowman your new congressman from New York. That'll be coming up shortly. But now, obviously Indiana and Kentucky were never in doubt. They were always gonna go to Trump. Vermont was never in doubt. It was always gonna go to Biden. Those are not remotely swing states. That's why we're not remotely worried and there's nothing has gone out of the ordinary yet. Now though, for the first time, we have Florida results. So let's buckle up a little bit here. 13% reporting, Donald Trump with a 53-46 lead, 7-point lead. And right now, this is basically, we're on this first or second drive of the first quarter, to use a football analogy. And right now, Trump's going, call it, it's over, game's over, right? Game's over. But guys, as you can see on the blog that we have, there's tyt.com/live blog that gives you updates as well. But at the very top of that, there's a link to our basically almost like a voter guide, but it tells you who counts fast and who counts slow. Pennsylvania counts slow, so the results you'll see tonight from Pennsylvania are not necessarily indicative of how it's going to turn out. And Trump is expected to have more in-person voting, so that's what people are calling the red mirage, where it looks like Republicans, including Trump, are leading, but that's because they are very slow to count the mail-in ballots, or Democrats have a big advantage. In Florida, they have already counted the mail-in ballots, so now they are reporting things rapidly. That's why instantly we're at 13% reporting in Florida. If it was a normal election, it would take much longer. So now 13% doesn't mean anything yet. Especially because it's a hodgepodge of bringing in the mail-in votes you already counted, and I don't know exactly how they're bringing them in. It's since nearly 2/3 of the votes are mail-in, it is possible that they could have just said 63% reporting, and here's all the mail-in votes. They have not done that yet. They're bringing it out more slowly with 7%, 10%, 13. Now it's up to 14% reporting, and it's still 7 points for Trump. But we have no idea if that 14% is the in-person voting where Trump has an advantage. And we told you about that at the very beginning of the day. More Republicans showing up at the polls in Florida as expected. Or if that 14% is the mail-in ballots where Biden is supposed to have an advantage. So it matters a ton where that 14% is coming from. Yes, John.
It's not, it is the distribution between day of votes and the early votes, but it's also where in the state either of those two things are coming from. And the first 13 could be weighted one way or the other based on that. It could be that some areas of the state are reporting their totals more early, whether they were the early ones or they were the day of ones. And we just had it jump up to 20% reporting. It's now 50.9 to 48.2, so it's a little bit closer. But bear in mind, we're still shy of 2.4 million votes. And even in 2016, there were more than 9 million votes cast. It's probable, I would say, that more than that will be cast this time around. So there's still a long way to go.
Yeah, but you can see it narrowing from the very first batch that they put in. The numbers John just gave you are only a 4-point difference. So even in this last couple of minutes that we've been talking, it went from 7 points to 4 points. So because if you're watching on normal election night, and we cover all the big election nights, midterms, presidential, you name it, we cover it. And a lot of the big primary nights too, not just for presidential, but for progressives who are running. One of the best nights we ever had. Actually, almost all the great nights in TYT were primary nights. When Cara Eastman came from behind and won her primary in 2018, John and I went nuts. It was at the very end of the night. It was jubilant. It was wonderful. The night AOC beat Joe Crowley in that primary. The night Bernie Sanders won the Michigan primary in 2016. So there's these great moments. So if some of you have seen some of those, and you'll see that we tell you 1% reporting doesn't mean anything. 10% reporting on a normal night in a normal election would begin to mean something. 20% would definitely begin to mean something. But this is not a normal election. In a normal election, most of the votes are in person and they count them, and we can see which counties they come in from. So for example, if the 20% in Florida comes from the Panhandle, well, Trump's supposed to have a bigger advantage there, and I would say that's not good news.
Cenk.
Yes, go ahead, John.
Cenk, really fast, you mentioned the Panhandle. The Panhandle will actually be closing in about a half an hour, so that's an added wrinkle. But importantly, Joe Biden has just surged to the lead in Florida, 49.8 to Donald Trump's 49.3. We've got 22%. I think we can call it.
Well, look, it's the Trump theory. It's not our theory. As soon as you have the lead, you call it. All right, we're on to the third drive in the first quarter. We're calling it.
All right, Florida goes to Trump. I mean, Biden.
By the way, guys, I will.
No, she said Trump. That means it goes to him.
Oh no, Anna, you ruined it.
I know.
Okay,
sorry.
So let me say two important things there. Number one, we just told you Trump winning by 7 or 4 with 15 or 20% of the vote reporting doesn't matter that much because you don't know where it's coming from, both geographically and temporally. But that means Biden winning by a tiny amount with 22% reporting also doesn't matter. It's not indicative. We have no idea. The minute we have an idea based on facts where we find out, hey, those are mail-in, those are in person, or those are coming from a certain place, then we'll let you know. In fact, the information John just gave you is really important. Panhandle hasn't closed yet because they're in a different time zone. So that's good news for Trump. Panhandle's for Trump, so that vote is coming in later. We don't know if this is from mainly Miami-Dade or where it's the middle of Florida, et cetera, the current votes that are in, and that obviously makes a big difference. So the other important thing is the 2000 election, and I just want to give you one name here because it's the one name that basically is driving all of Donald Trump's strategy, because he knows without some degree of cheating, there's almost no chance he can win. So the name is John Ellis Bush. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with him, he was George W. Bush's cousin, and he was the person in charge of calling the election on the night of the 2000 election for Fox News. And when that election was indisputably a statistical tie, John Ellis got on the phone with his two cousins, George W. Bush, who was running for president, and Jeb Bush, who at the time was the governor of Florida. And the state that was in dispute, of course, was Florida. And the three Bush relatives together decided they were going to call it for George W. Bush. And like lemmings, the rest of the media at that time, they were total suckers. And they didn't realize Fox News was just conservative propaganda. They thought it was a real news outlet, and that they were losing to Fox News in calling the election and getting more people to watch them call the election. So they panicked and all called it for Bush. As we found out after the election, when the Supreme Court had allowed a recount of Florida, all of Florida, under every way of counting, Al Gore would have won. So John Ellis Bush, combined with the Supreme Court, already stole an election for the Republicans. That's their manual for how to steal an election. By the way, it also includes mobs, which they sent down to Miami-Dade. That was the famous Brooke Brothers mob that, of all people, and he's back, Roger Stone orchestrated that back in 2000. And so those were all Republican lobbyists and consultants pretending to be an outraged citizen mob who didn't want a recount in a democracy. And that insane trick already worked once. So Trump has about, at best, a 10% chance of winning tonight. So what he's hoping for is a total mess and chaos, and to call the election early. And in this case, instead of preventing a recount, he wants to prevent a count from completing. So they'll say absurd things like, well, if you keep counting, it'll flip the results. No, we don't know what the results are until you do the full count. That's not flipping the results, that's finding out the results. So the reason Trump has been beating that war drum over the last couple of months is because he's seen the disastrous poll numbers for months. He knows he has almost no chance of winning, so he's hoping for mayhem. But if it's a close election, you might get mayhem. If it's a blowout, you will not get mayhem. You'll just have it be called relatively quickly. So now, important context for Florida. Guys, nobody thought Florida was going to be a blowout. If it winds up being a blowout, it'll be a blowout for Biden over Trump, and that'll be surprising even to me. I think Biden's going to win Florida, but I think he's going to win it by a couple of points. It's a close race, and I wouldn't be at all surprised if Trump won it. This is the important part. Biden doesn't need Florida at all. He could lose Florida, he could lose Ohio, he could lose North Carolina, he could lose Arizona, Iowa, Georgia, Texas, and still win the election, and pretty easily. Trump needs to win all of those, plus Pennsylvania. And even if he wins Pennsylvania, Biden could win the election back by winning either North Carolina or Arizona. So Biden has in poker parlance, he has a lot of outs. There's a lot of ways to win. Trump has only one way to win, and it's a very, very tough road. So now I'll give you more results. Now these are starting to be the numbers large enough where they're starting to be relevant no matter where they come from. 36% reporting, Biden now at 50.3, Trump at 48.8. So Biden has a 1.5 lead with more than a third of the votes reporting in Florida, and obviously at this pace, that means the mail-in votes are coming. Okay, they're starting to count the mail-in votes. But if that's true, and again, not starting to count, they already counted them, they're reporting them, okay? If that's true, Biden has to build up a lead because he has the lead in mail-in votes, the panhandle is gonna close, and the in-person is more likely to go to Trump. So don't get too excited about a 1.5 point lead for Biden at this point either. Okay.
We also got an update. Brett let me know that apparently Marjorie Taylor Greene has won. And QAnon will be in the halls of Congress asking questions in congressional testimony, voting on legislation. It's a fun time to be an American.
Yeah, so we are doing an election pool, and some of us let you know what our predictions were earlier in the day. I'll repeat mine real quick for the Electoral College. I have it at 335 for Biden, 203 for Trump. That's a landslide, and I thought I was being conservative. So we'll see how it turns out. John had him at 360, but we want you guys to participate too. It's not a contest, it's just for fun. So go to tyt.com/pool, fill it out and see how close you get. There's a bunch of other things too, and the reason I brought it up here is one of the questions is how many QAnon members do you think there will be in Congress after this election? I had it at 2, and already 1 is on the board. So for her, the challenge was winning the primary. That is a very, very red district, and a Republican had almost no chance of losing. So we knew she was going in. There's a second QAnon Republican who's very likely to win. If that happens, we'll let you know about that as well. Yes, Anna?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, look, I think that one thing that we need to keep in mind, and one of our viewers mentioned this through a tweet. Let's say best case scenario for us tonight, Biden wins, right? It's not as if all of the problems that we're dealing with currently just disappear, right? I think Donald Trump, I I think he was a symbolic figure in essential, or the culmination of all sorts of societal issues that we've had but haven't been dealing with. So the fact that we have QAnon people getting elected into Congress, that's real. And QAnon isn't just some fringe group of conspiracy theorists. It has now become pretty indicative of what the Republican Party believes and what they want, right? And so we need to keep that in mind, and we need to ask ourselves, how did it get to the point where the Republican Party became such a welcoming place for, honestly, some of the most dangerous people in some cases, like people who will show up to a random pizzeria in Washington, D.C. with guns, thinking that they're gonna free child sex slaves. But really, one other thing I want you to consider is that we're now in this age where if someone disagrees with their politics, if someone is considered a political opponent, they just go ahead and accuse them of being pedophiles. Like, I've seen that happen over and over and over again. So we need to continue holding feckless politicians accountable. We need to hold Biden accountable as much as we can. And I'm very realistic about what he isn't actually gonna do for us progressives. But at the same time, we need to be cognizant of the fact that QAnon isn't gonna magically go away. These people exist, that group of people continues to grow. And I'm not sure what the solution is to that, but it is a problem.
All right, guys, more updates in Florida. Trump has retaken the lead. So now 43% reporting, 50.1 to 49. So that is a 1-point lead, obviously. I cannot make heads or tails out of these Florida results. So I got a big old, because this is so unusual the way that they're reporting the results. John, do you have any further numbers on Florida or any guess as to what these numbers mean?
I do. Before I give you that, though, I do want to thank two individuals in the Twitch chat, Obi-Wan Kenobi and it looks like Sinfail as well. Each gave 100 subs to our audience, which is absolutely awesome. We have a very large audience on Twitch right now, so thank you very much for encouraging that audience. So I'm looking demographically as the votes are coming in, and obviously we're missing that huge chunk out of the panhandle, which I have a feeling is probably not going to help Biden. I do know that what we love on election days is needles, and so the New York Times live forecast needle is now giving it an 84% chance that Trump is going to win in Florida. There's still a lot of sections that aren't fully reporting. There's some sections that haven't reported at all, so I have no idea what their lean is going to be. But yeah, it's not looking absolutely great at this point from Biden's point of view.
Okay, 45%.
I think we're up to 45% now.
Yeah, 45% reporting, 50.2 to 48.9. So that's 1.3 percentage lead for Trump. But I think it's actually better than that because of the panhandle situation. So now I think Trump's looking pretty good in Florida, all things considered. This thing keeps moving nonstop. Now it's only a half a point lead for Trump with 46% reporting. So we've got to take a break, guys. But we're gonna come back, we're gonna have all of these results as soon as they happen, and we're looking into the details of these states to give you a better sense of how indicative they are of the final outcome. And I'm gonna read two last comments from Super Chat on YouTube. Greg Noir said, love today's energy, you guys are lifting my mood quite a bit. Finn Addict said, time to get rid of the virus destroying our country. And well, while we're at it, let's get rid of COVID too. So I hear you on all that. If you hit the join button below on YouTube, you become part of the Young Turks. Your support makes all the difference. And at the end of today's coverage, we're gonna have 2 extra hours for members. At the Essentials level, you get all of our post games. At the premium level, you get all of our videos, all of our shows. But even at the lowest level, you still support the show and we still see your names and you get a TYT badge and we appreciate it and we do this show together. And if you're watching anywhere else, tyt.com/join. We'll be right back. All right, back on the Young Turks election coverage. Cenk, Uygur, Anna Kasparian, John Iadarola with you guys. As usual, Florida is nuts. During the break, it jumped to 51% reporting. Normally that would be monumentally important, but again, because of the mail-in voting situation, it's so hard to tell who's actually leading. At 51% reporting, Trump had a 1.5 point lead. He'd retaken the lead from Biden. Then 58% reporting Biden retook the lead from Trump and had a half a point lead. Now 59% reporting Trump has retaken the lead at 0.3%. Impossible to know who's actually leading.
It's almost as if we should wait until a significant number of the votes are already in, and we can.
No, 59% is a giant percentage.
It is, but
normally you'd be getting close to calling it at 59%, but it's just seesawing back and forth because of the mail-in voting, and you can't make rhyme or reason out of it. Look, I have so much more for you guys. Robert just wrote in the member section. I just signed up after years of watching the free show on YouTube because I truly believe you make a difference. Way to go, TYT. And you guys have a swarm of comments, and I love you for it. Thank you for all the people signing up. I'm gonna get to all you guys. A huge contribution from John Lee, but we've got more results. West Virginia called for Trump, so Trump's won 3 out of 4 so far, and there's more closings and more results. John.
Yeah, including that, at least according to the New York Times, Shelley Moore Capito is being projected as the winner of that Senate race in West Virginia as well, which is obviously very bad news because that's Paula Jean Swearengin race.
So I just want to be clear about that. Paula Jean Swearengin is one of the original Justice Democrats from 2018. She's one of the best progressive candidates in the country. She was in knockdown the House with AOC and Cori Bush, who are now in Congress. And we all did a lot to help her, and we should have. Did I know that she was a massive underdog? Of course, it's West Virginia.
Yeah.
Although I'll get to the irony of West Virginia in a little bit. But you help progressives no matter what. If they're authentic and they're real and you're building at least towards the future and you've got a shot. And that's what Paula Jean had, and I love what a fighter she is. And that was always gonna be a tough race, but she fought to the end and we love her for it. And guys, we're the good guys. We don't celebrate just the people who won and go, yay, they're celebrities now. You celebrate the people who tried. And Paula Jean Swearengin has given her life and all of her effort to all of us over the last 4 years.
Yep.
So we love you, Paula Jean, and you keep going. All right, John, give us more closings and then I'll give you the irony on West Virginia.
Yeah, okay, so closing as of just 4 minutes ago, we have the Panhandle in Florida, North Carolina, West Virginia, obviously, that's what we've been talking about, and Ohio. Some of those obvious quick calls, some of them important. Usually in a lot of cases, these are states that are far more important for Donald Trump than they are for Joe Biden.
Yeah, and so, look, we'll give you the easy calls as we go along, like West Virginia and Vermont, super easy calls. Obviously West Virginia is gonna go to Trump, obviously Vermont's gonna go to Biden, so those have happened. We'll update you on the results like Florida that are coming in super quick and in an amazing, interesting way. And then of course, as soon as a relevant swing state is called, that's a big, big moment, and we'll tell you all about that. The reason I brought up the West Virginia again is because today I weirdly got obsessed, and for good reason, about the Reagan-Carter election in 1980. Because burned in our minds is that Reagan blew out Carter. And in a lot of ways, he most certainly did. He got over 400 electoral college votes in that election. But he beat him by about 10 points. And going into this election, for the national popular vote, Biden in the very last poll had a 10-point lead. Now, but what's fascinating about that is the country and the states have become so polarized that when Reagan won by 10 points, he won everywhere but 6 states. And by the way, one of the states that Jimmy Carter won was West Virginia. So in 40 short years, instead of us being a united country, where if someone won big, they won everywhere. Reagan was a Republican, but he won in New York, he won in New Jersey, he won in California, he won in Vermont, etc. Now, nope, the blue states are blue, the red states are red, and there's only about a dozen swing states that still fluctuate. I don't think that kind of polarization is good for the country. I think the media drove that polarization. I also don't think it's a good trend that we lost populous states like West Virginia that used to be so Democratic and now have become so Republican. So those are just big macro trends. But overall, the biggest trend of all is that the Republicans, I know right now in this current state of the election, this early in the first quarter, as you're seeing red states pile up for Trump and you see Florida starting to go in Trump's direction, I'm positive that you're out there getting nervous. But the reality is that the big picture is the Republicans have an overwhelming challenge to overcome demographically. Trump did overcome it in 2016, and it would be one of the most amazing things I've ever seen if he overcame it in 2020. Latest results from Florida, now 2/3 of Florida reporting, 66%. Hold, okay, they just changed the numbers again. Now Biden has retaken the lead at 50.2 to 48.9. So he has a 1.3% lead. If it was I'm sorry that I keep repeating it, but it's true. I've got to remind you constantly so you don't take these numbers out of context. If it was a normal election and you had 66% reporting, I would say you're getting close to locked in, and whoever's leading has a big advantage. Although this 1.3 points is so small that I would still say it's totally up for grabs. But in this case, it's double up for grabs, given the uncertainties here. Yes, John.
And by the way, I'm also seeing in terms of the counting, supposedly Miami-Dade, which I'm reading elsewhere, has delivered something like 100,000 plus more votes for Trump this cycle so far, at least is estimated, than it had back in 2016, is apparently they're doing their counting fast, and the later votes are still expected to disproportionately favor Donald Trump. They are saying, though, that in Miami-Dade, which is going heavy for Trump, they might need to count some ballots on Wednesday, except that obviously that would be illegal according to Donald Trump, and they shouldn't do that.
Well, look, it's a tough break for Donald Trump, but we stopped counting at midnight. Also a tough break for Hawaii because their polls don't close till after midnight Eastern. But it is what it is, it's the Trump rule. No, of course, you're supposed to count every vote in a thing we call democracy. Trump has to be reminded of that every once in a while. By the way, more results, 67% reporting in Florida. It's down to a 1-point lead for Biden.
And Virginia has been called for Joe Biden, according to the New York Times.
Yeah, now look, that's another interesting phenomenon of the last 20 years. Virginia used to be a solidly red state, then it became a solid swing state, and now it has become such a solidly blue state that it gets called at the same time that Vermont and West Virginia do. So Virginia, blue as far as the eye can see in terms of time. And that's why I say to you, even as you worry about Florida really early on tonight, you have to remember, we're grabbing states. And yes, sometimes the Republicans get Ohio, and now their lead continues to build in Ohio with the possible exception of this election, but I wouldn't count on Ohio in any election, including this one, but certainly past this one. But the Democrats are picking up more states than the Republicans are. I know that it certainly doesn't look like it with Trump in office, but that is where all of the demographics are going, and you're beginning to see some of the electoral results of that now. I'm going to continue to update you because I don't know how fascinated you are by these changing numbers in Florida, but I'm obsessed with it. 72% reporting, and Biden has now taken at 1. Is that 2.5? Yeah, it's a 2.5 lead.
2.5.
2.5 with 72% reporting. John, can I say for the first time that's starting to get a little bit real?
According to the auto analysis being done by the New York Times of where ballots are likely to come from, they think it's still 95% chance of going to Trump. So, I mean, you can say that, but at least the robot, the ghost in the machine doesn't agree with you so far.
All right.
Well, I mean, if the robot doesn't agree, we got to go with the robot.
Yeah, the robot also thought that Hillary Clinton had a 98% chance of winning the last election. Okay.
This is what Andrew Yang warned against. Can I also say, just to mix it in, and then we'll jump back to the count. So there have been a couple of places that we've talked about there being issues with the voting machines going down, or someone spotted a possum, so they had to close the thing down for a couple hours or whatever. Some of those places are having increased hours, including in Spalding County. In Georgia, they're going to be keeping polls open for 2 additional hours because of the issues they had with their equipment earlier. That's not the same as actually being able to vote in an expeditious fashion, but at least if you are in line, you now have a lot higher chance of getting in. If you're in line, stay in line, but now it's open for longer as well. Cook County, which also had some issues, is going to be staying open for an additional hour as well. And so some of these places that had issues, they're doing something to try to counter that.
Yeah, I'm going to take this quick moment to read some of your comments. Ham and Cheese on Super Chat wrote, just got back from voting Biden, Florida, late in the day, but I'm a working American who still did 9 to 5 today. I love that you're a patriotic American and you voted. And by the way, voting day should be a holiday, obviously, because we're supposed to live in a democracy. Amanda Soilu wrote in, you guys opened my eyes in 2018 and it's been a hell of a ride. Finally joined like a real grown person. Thank you, Amanda, you're awesome. And Sandy Page said, thank you all for your entertaining way of educating me on politics, election process, and this crazy pandemic. I am Brian in the members section on tyt.com/join. That's how you join through the website. Said, hi everyone, I rarely watch live. Happy to be spending it here with all of you, the viewers. And that's right, guys, we're doing this show together. You guys power us. So you could hit the join button below if you're watching on YouTube, if you're watching anywhere else, tyt.com/join. And please don't forget our fundraising drive, tyt.com/go. John Lee just gave $10,000. That's his 3rd time giving. He's amazing. We named the hallway out there based on what he named it after a tribe. He's such a great guy. I'm gonna read his letter later in the broadcast, but tyt.com/go. If you guys, you don't have to give that much. Any amount means you're part of the Young Turks and we're doing this progressive show together with you guys. Amazing, important results when we return. All right, back on the Young Turks, Cenk, John, and Anna with you guys. Florida continues to be weird. Biden has a 0.8% lead, so that's under 1%, with 79% reporting. So, but the New York Times has Donald Trump's chances of winning at 95% for Florida. So that's not that weird. It's just because this situation is very different than a normal election. There's the mail-in ballots. There's the different counties coming in at different times, and apparently there's some interesting developments out of Miami-Dade. Hard to make out exactly what those are right now. We alluded to some earlier in the program, but I don't know which way that cuts. I don't know if it cuts in favor of Trump or Biden really. So for the moment being, Biden with a small lead in Florida, but one that the pollsters or the experts are saying is not going to last. Now it's down to 0.6 for Biden. John,
yeah,
do you want to jump in?
There's a bunch of counties in the Panhandle that still they don't have literally a single vote reporting from. So, if they end up 0.6 off from each other, and you still have a ton of votes that are going to go heavily for Trump, that might be enough, maybe.
Yeah, that by the way, that alone could explain all of it. Panhandle is strongly for Trump. If they, given what John just said, that they're not, the votes from the Panhandle are not in yet. But there's one more curveball to that. How many mail-in ballots were from the Panhandle, and did any of those report? Or is it just the in-person voting that hasn't reported yet? But either way, if they haven't come in at all, and Biden's hanging on to it now, a 0.5 lead, half a point lead with 80% reporting, that's not good news for Biden, okay? So again, Biden does not need Florida. Trump absolutely positively needs Florida. So if he gets it, he's of course going to be ecstatic about that, but he's still got a long road ahead of him. And before we get to the rest of the states here, just wanted to do a couple of shout outs here. I think this is for John, and I want to do it while you were still on, John. Unca Monkey in our member section said, just ordered myself a Dragon Squad shirt. Thanks for helping to keep me sane through all of this, Dragon Daddy.
Oh, you think that's for John?
Okay.
You think that's for John?
Is that what you are?
I think it's
Your
for
Dragon
Edwin.
Daddy?
I think that was a message for Edwin.
Yeah, I think it was for Edwin. No, it's taken 6 months of me asking people, pleading, begging, really, to call me that. But I think it's starting to catch on now, actually.
I think you like it. Look at you.
So by the way, Dragon Squad shirts are totally selling out on shoptyt.com. But I love the new nicknames we got. So apparently John is Dragon Daddy, which is fun in a couple of ways. Anna is the Salt Dragon. And today I got named Justice Dragon. How is that not the most badass thing you've ever seen? This is all in reference to John's show, The Damage Report, which you should check out every day. 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. It's an awesome show. Check out the Damage Report on all the platforms that we're on. And I want to give a shout out to our awesome, brave sponsors who are so progressive. Plant Your Change. If you arrange your credit card or debit card through them, they round up for you if you want it. For every dollar, they plant a tree. So, hey, you paid $2.37 for something or $2.73. They round up to the nearest dollar and they plant a tree for that. It's our way, your way of saving their environment. If you want to find out more, tyt.com/trees. And you don't need anything new. Your current credit or debit card is good enough, and it takes just a tiny amount of time to do that. So thank you to them for being a sponsor. And now, John, you have more states?
Yeah, sorry, I'm looking at some of these sort of demographic bits of information coming in. Trump apparently, I believe this is specific to Florida, apparently doing better with Hispanic and Cuban voters than in 2016.
Shocker.
And better in black areas as well. Biden is doing better in older white areas, but not by as much apparently, seeing so far. Anyway, so obviously in Florida, it's still very close. Biden's up now by 0.1. I would just ask him to call it while there's still a chance. And anyway, in Georgia, which is up to 7% of the vote, Biden is up by 2.6%. It's still very close, and a lot of the votes still to come in.
But in the version that I saw, and we're sometimes looking at different websites, it's a huge advantage for us because
I've got a bunch open.
Yeah, because they all have to. CNN has to stick with their official numbers. New York Times has to stick with their official numbers, et cetera. Right? We could look at all of them. In the one that I'm looking at right now, Ossoff is trailing Purdue. So it's an interesting situation with. It's too few reporting in Georgia to really to make too big a deal out of it. But it'd be interesting to have Biden leading, but Ossoff, the Democratic candidate, trailing so far in Georgia. A lot of time to go in Georgia before it gets real. Right now, Biden with a 0.3 lead in, 0.1 lead in Florida. And obviously, if this keeps going the way that it is, Trump will retake the lead, and then he appears to look good in Florida. So, John, which other polls or states have closed or are about to close?
Well, the next hour is actually where it gets pretty interesting because there's quite a few. So let's see, we've got Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Texas. Could be important. The far western parts of Michigan, as well as the far western parts of Texas, will be open for an additional hour, but the vast majority of both of those states will be closing. Texas is expected that it will be able to do most of the count, but probably not all of the count by Tuesday, which could matter if it's close, of course. You've also got polls closing in Alabama and Maine. Okay, and it looks like we've got a number of other states that are probably going to be a little bit less exciting, like North Dakota, South Dakota, Kansas, Oklahoma, those sorts of states, and a few states across the South. So we're expanding to a lot of states at 5, a few additional ones at 5:30.
Yeah, and if you're wondering, well, okay, Alabama and Maine, that doesn't sound too exciting. Those are not swing states. No, there are exciting races there. And as we get the Senate races and the congressional races that we're looking out for, we'll give you more updates on that as well. Alabama has an important Senate race. Doug Jones, you remember, of course, beat Roy Moore in what would have otherwise been a shocking upset if it wasn't Roy Moore who was in the race. And so now Tommy Tuberville went in with a large polling lead in Alabama. So the Democrats are likely to lose a seat there in the Senate. But they're going to pick up a lot more in other places if the polling is right. And in Maine, Maine's 2nd district could go either direction. The rest of the districts in Maine and Nebraska are the only 2 states that do electoral college points based on districts. So there's one district in Maine that's up for grabs. So we'll be looking out for that, and that could be very important if Trump wins Pennsylvania and Biden wins Arizona, and everything else stays the same, meaning that as expected, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Minnesota go to Biden and the rest go to Trump. At that point, the 2 districts in Maine and Nebraska will decide the election. So it's super relevant how that goes. John, more?
Yeah, in addition, we also have some of the other East Coast states, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, New Jersey, Maryland, Delaware, and DC too. Yeah. I don't think those are as hotly contested, but they are going to be closing.
No, but what you'd be surprised about in Delaware is nothing. No, Delaware is not at all interesting. Unfortunately, I wish Washington, D.C. was more interesting. Democrats will win in a landslide, and it'll only matter for the presidential race, but not obviously for Congress, where they're not represented, which is, of course, insane. Hassani Burton just wrote in with a very generous super chat, so thank you. No matter who becomes president, it is mandatory that we keep pushing for progressive policy. Thank you, TYT, for being the first and largest online media for progressives. Thank you, brother, you make that possible. We do this show together. Later, speaking of progressive headquarters here, we've got Nina Turner, Jamal Bowman, Julie Oliver, Mike Siegel, Cara Eastman, all gonna join us later in this broadcast. Big Brother Motown on Super Chat said, got my pizza, got my drink, glued to the TV and watching TYT on the tablet. This is better than the Super Bowl. It is, and now with Trump leading in Florida, you can't help but get a little nervous, and all of a sudden we got a game. So, oh boy. Okay, it's again, nothing to worry about if you're looking at overall projections. We don't need Florida, but rather win it. And one other thing that's important, as my IFB just flew out. Guys, remember, if Biden was going to win Florida, we'd already be calling the election. So the one thing we know for sure is we're not calling the election quickly because Biden does not look to be in great shape in Florida. One other programming note, we got a new ticker down there. So if you're just joined up as a member by hitting the join button below on YouTube, or if you just became a member on Twitch, you might see your name in that ticker, so look out for that. And we're also putting some of your comments, including some of your super chats on there. Anna.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a quick note about Miami-Dade and how support for Trump among Cuban voters in Miami-Dade increased this time around. It just kind of shows you how well the communism, socialism, fear-mongering works with the Cuban electorate, to be quite honest with you. So we might laugh at it. I think that most young people definitely laugh at that kind of fear-mongering. But Cubans in South Florida are shook. Like every time they hear the word socialist, like, oh no, we gotta do something, we gotta vote against that person. So of course Biden is not a socialist. Biden is very much, I hesitate to even say moderate Democrat. He's conservative on a lot of issues. So it doesn't matter, no rhyme or reason. There's no proof that he's socialist, but all Trump had to do was use that messaging over and over again. And he did gain support among Cuban voters in South Florida.
With 81% reporting, Biden hanging on to a 0.1% lead. And we'll give you updates on that. I'm gonna give you one more comment here. Jennifer Smith on Super Chat, also very generous. Thank you, Jennifer. Love you for it. Saying, sitting at home alone with my cats watching this go down, and you guys are helping me not to take a Xanax every 30 minutes. Thank you. Love TYT. We love you back. Don't Xanax. Everything's going to be okay. When we come back, a lot more results and another great progressive, David Day. We'll be right back. Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, and I'll see you soon.